All right, Raheem, so last night in Australia, Errol Spence retires after losing a unanimous decision to Tim Tszyu in Tszyu's backyard of Australia. Let's get right into it. I'll give a quick technical breakdown, couple quick points, and then you get to cooking. So Spence comes out trying to be himself, using his jab a lot, fighting with a lot of volume as he was always one to do in his heyday. But a lot of it's getting blocked by Tim Tszyu. But he's getting off first and early and often. And then Tszyu turns him. The balance isn't good. Sweeps a right hand, buzzes him, and takes that first round. Then Spence comes back with a lot of volume, a lot of successful body work in rounds 2 or 3 to go up 2-1 on my card. But he was spending a lot of energy. He was having to expend a lot. And years ago, he would have been able to maintain that kind of pace and was the bigger guy against fighters at welterweight, and he'd be able to sustain that. Those punches would have had more of an effect on a welterweight, but the snap isn't really there. He's pushing his shots a lot, and the balance isn't there. So round 4, Tszyu starts getting with his right hand again. He starts touching the body more, giving Spence some of his own medicine to the body, being very accurate with his right hand. Spence then wins his last round of the fight in the 5th with more body work, just throwing with a lot of volume, but Tszyu is getting more comfortable, not really bothered by anything Spence is landing, even the body shots. And then round 6, Tszyu takes over the fight and never looks back. I had him sweeping 6 through 12 to win the last 7 rounds. To win this fight, 117, 111 on my card. Started making Spence pay for reaching to the body. Started countering him up top with his right hand. Quicker, sharper hands, better balance, better puncher, and the stronger fighter at 160 pounds. So yeah, I had him winning 117, 111, but this irritated me because now I'm seeing everybody talk about Spence's balance and things like that. And I said when we talked about this fight months ago, before it was actually officially signed, I said his balance isn't good anymore. Tszyu is the sharper fighter with the faster hands at this stage of his career. He's a little bit of an underrated pull counter puncher. And he had his little pulls that started to take away the body work of Spence. And I mentioned how Spence's speech was concerning heading into this fight. Then we get to the fight being announced the morning of Benavidez-Zittel. We did a video about it. I mentioned all that again. I was on Sean's show with Hasim Rahman Jr., Sean Porter. They're all picking Spence, and I'm like, I think Tszyu is the sharper, better fighter right now. And we get to the morning of Benavidez-Zittel, and I asked Spence about his speech and about his balance. And he acknowledged, yeah, my balance was off for the Crawford fight. The truth is, his balance was off from the Ugas fight. And he was always a heavy, on the front foot kind of guy. Now, his balance was much better once upon a time than it's been his last 3 fights. But I'm going to say this. Errol Spence's peak was around the Lamont Peterson fight, and then the Mikey Garcia fight was his peak, and I think he got progressively worse every fight since then. The Errol Spence that fought Sean Porter was not as sharp as the Errol Spence that fought Mikey. The Errol Spence that fought Danny Garcia was not as sharp as the Errol Spence that fought Sean Porter. The guy who fought Ugas, that's where the balance really started to begin to show a lot of ugly signs if you go back and watch that fight. And I at least said that the night before the fight on our emergency podcast. Spence wasn't as good in the Ugas fight as he was against Danny. And then he wasn't as good against Crawford as he was against Ugas. And then he wasn't as good last night as he even was against Crawford. And yes, Terrence Crawford fans, Terrence Crawford would have always beaten Errol Spence handily and stop him because Spence is a volume puncher fighting the greatest counter puncher of his time. It's a horrible style matchup. Crawford's just better than him. So that's not some point I'm trying to make in a fight that I picked Crawford by knockout for years about, let alone when they actually made it in 2023. But the point I'm getting at is each fight was a decline from his peak moment. And yeah, Mikey was a lightweight and undersized, but he was an undefeated guy on the pound for pound. And that was his biggest moment in terms of box office, Fox pay-per-view, 47,000 or whatever it was at Cowboy Stadium. And then it's just been a slow decline to where he is now in that. And there's a lot of people talking about, oh, he's a Hall of Famer, surefire. I was on my live last night, and I've been saying it's borderline because, and why would I say it's borderline? Well, Fernando Vargas still isn't in the Hall of Fame. He has a win over a first ballot Hall of Famer in Winky Wright. He beat about as many champions, Iquarte, Javier Castillejo, Yuri Boy Campos, Raul Marquez, but he actually has a win over a fellow Hall of Famer who was once in the top 3 pound for pound, who, is a Hall of Fame pound for pound level elite fighter. Errol Spence doesn't have that. But you know who did? Michael Moore. Michael Moore beat Evander Holyfield for the lineal unified heavyweight championship, and he didn't get in until a year or two ago. Antonio Tarver knocked out Roy Jones, who was the best fighter of his generation, won the fighter of the 90s, #1 pound for pound when Tarver iced him in 2 rounds, and he just got in this year. He had to wait a long time, and Tarver was a 2-time lineal light heavyweight champion. So Fernando Vargas was the youngest junior middleweight champion of all time up until Canelo, and his title was more legit than the WBC strap. Canelo wound up winning at a younger age. Vargas beat a Hall of Famer, isn't in. Michael Moore beat Evander Holyfield and was a light heavyweight champion, didn't get in till recently. Tarver won a medal at the Olympics, wasn't just an Olympian, knocked out Roy Jones, won the light heavyweight title twice, and he just got in. So Errol Spence, to put it in perspective, he never beat a guy who was on the pound for pound list at the time he beat them. And despite having 3 welterweight titles and being the #1 welterweight for a number of years, he was never actually the lineal welterweight champion. So there's a lot of fighters just as decorated, if not a little bit more, who had to wait 10, 15 years before they got in. And another, Zab Judah. Is Zab Judah in the Hall of Fame? Zab Judah was the undisputed welterweight champion when he knocked out Corey Spinks. Zab Judah, did a lot better against Floyd Mayweather, his Terrence Crawford of his era, than Errol Spence did against Terrence Crawford. Zab Judah, no one talks about Zab Judah getting in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Very Good. So I think Spence, he may just be a Hall of Very Good guy. I'm not convinced he's a Hall of Famer. And if he is a Hall of Famer, I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But yeah, it was, he still showed a lot of grit in this fight. And I give him a lot of credit on a really good career, made a lot of money, had a fan-friendly style, the jab, the fundamentals. But it's time to say some of those uncomfortable truths about Spence. And yeah, it was, and then, Tszyu didn't look that great either. I mean, he still has more in the tank left than Spence. And now at middleweight, it's smart that he's fighting at middleweight because there's no action for him at 54. The waters are too deep with the 3-headed monster of Ortiz, Fundora, and Boots. But, maybe he could fight Erislandy Lara, send another guy home if he's capable of that, or he'd walk into a bunch of straight left hands by Lara. But good on Tszyu. He got the job done as a slight underdog at home and makes good on his "this is my dad's Julio Cesar Chavez" fight, beating a big name well past his prime.
Normally I would have interrupted you about 4 times, but I knew better. Because while the things you say about Spence's record, I can't contest or argue the point, what they mean, though, may be lost in your recitation of his record. The reason that you have 8.5 minutes off the dome about Errol Spence and we're so passionate that we needed an emergency pod just 24 hours ago or so is because something about Errol Spence is more consequential than those statistics. There is a reason why I couldn't pick the fight. The main reason why I couldn't pick the fight is because we hadn't seen him in the ring in 3 years, and he got his ass whipped against Crawford the last time we saw him, and I didn't think that was representative of his best, and I just too many X's, too many X factors that I just couldn't really do an honest job of handicapping this fight. I just didn't know, and we wouldn't know until we saw what we seen. But beyond that, what gave me a narrative to go with was my honest feeling for the end of an era potentially in this fight on the back of Errol Spence. He represents a time that is now officially coming to a close. It's difficult to separate Errol Spence from the sea in PBC. Not because he was the only guy, but because he seemed to somehow be the representative guy. His peak was Dallas Cowboys say against Mikey Garcia. In fact, I worked for Fox on that broadcast. I put a skit together. Like, that was kind of an odd moment of cross-section between him doing his thing and me having an opportunity to do something very unique in a stadium that big on a pay-per-view that wide. And we had a great time that week. I've covered his entire career. There's some admitted emotion tied to the legacy of Errol Spence because it's tied into my own career. And I think a lot of people felt that. A lot of people were having a hard time looking at this thing completely objectively and taking their experience with Errol and what they wanted for him and for the end of his career out of the equation. A lot of good analysts, ex-fighters, recent fighters, his opponents even, miscalculated. They misread it because I believe what they wanted took precedent over what they would have assessed if there was no emotion tied to it. That can happen. Boxing is a community. This guy is one of those guys. So what I saw in this fight, I'm going to have to honestly give you two tracks. I can be objective because now I got something to objectively work with. But I can also tell you what people who have an affinity for this guy or feel like Errol Spence means something, we're also looking at. I can take you to the Ringwalk. I thought the Ringwalk was a favorite part of the fight for me, honestly. Tim Tszyu coming out to Eminem, then 50, to me was irony, because obviously Errol Spence is a black American. That's the cultural music of his day and time, and that was a tip of the hat to that culture in that time, one I can relate to. And then Errol, I didn't see this coming out to the tribal tip of the hat. It felt like he was absorbing that moment. And I couldn't tell whether or not he was absorbing it because this was the last time and he wanted to take it all in and have his walk and really appreciate after 3 years, after losing to Crawford, after the car accident, after all the stuff that he's overcome. He just wanted to do this one more time and do it right and really appreciate it before he said, I'm not doing this anymore. I, at this age, can understand taking a lap like that and hoping it turns out for the best. Like maybe you get in there and get a knockout or get a decision and look great and you got maybe one more walk in you after this. But if not, you still want to take that lap. And you don't want to take that lap against a Pringa or a whack. You want to take that lap against somebody, opponent you respect and somebody who people say, damn, Spence is a beast for coming in against this guy off of 3 years. And when I saw Spence greased up and looking around and touching fans with the gloves, getting right before he steps through the ropes, he takes a look and surveys the entire arena. It's probably the grease, but I thought I saw a tear in his eye. I was getting emotional, like, fuck, I don't know what this is. Is this the last time or the first of the next times? And I don't know if he knew either, but what I was sure about was he was taking in the moment. He was soaking it up. He at least knew that it could be the last time, and maybe it was the first time that he had ever done it where he really appreciated it, where he knew what it meant to him to be able to do that, even if it's not at home, even if it's the backyard of a guy who is a bit younger than you and might even beat you in the next 36 minutes. He climbs to those ropes and gives his best effort. I'm not mad at the Errol Spence effort. He came and went right at Tszyu. I know he's already a front forward foot fighter, I should say, and I know he's already an aggressive. That's his style. That's not new, but the way he fought after 3 years right off the bell, no feeling out round, no trying to keep the distance and hug and settle into the fight. No, not even a decent like jab, which you would expect a seasoned fighter just be like, let me work the jab a round or two and get my bearings and make sure this is what it used to be. No, he went right at it. And when the fight got tough, there was a genuine smile. It wasn't that shit-eating grin that you get from fighters when they get hurt and they try to play it off. No, he was enjoying himself. Even in the fight when it was at its toughest moments, he was still soaking it up. He was living the experience. I liked seeing that. At the same time that you realize that this fight probably wasn't going to be Errol Spence's night, that this thing was turning. I recognized it too, but I also felt like, you know what? This guy is fighting with so much kind of self-satisfaction, so much true heart, that maybe at any point he could hit him with that shot. He could, because he was hitting him. The thing is, his punches wasn't doing nothing. He, especially in the first 6 rounds, he was, I thought, was fighting the better fight. I liked the body work. When he landed upstairs, they were clean punches, most of them, and they just weren't effective. Like, this is like, effective punches versus accumulative shots. And maybe that body work does put some dividends in the bank that he can deposit or withdraw later. Maybe he's making good deposits. I was hoping for that. Like I told you, I'm telling you what I'm seeing objectively, and then what I'm feeling was the hope, right? That maybe later down the line, this is going to pay off. And then when Tszyu, especially in the first half of the fight, was connecting sparingly, he wasn't really stringing punches together, and it wasn't looking great. But when he did land, it was effective. When he did land, he was wobbling Spence. When he did land, you could tell, oh, this guy's got mustard on his shot, and Spence is eating this stuff. But man, I don't. If he starts, and I'm saying, if Tszyu starts, and this is what I'm thinking at the time, if Tszyu starts putting these punches together, Errol Spence is going to be in trouble, because these punches, when they come through, are hurting him. They're buzzing him. They're wobbling him. They're rocking him. The balancing really didn't give me as much trepidation because I expected it. You talked about it endlessly. Now everybody's talking about it. But it wasn't nothing new. I'm like, that ain't going to be the difference. The difference is going to be if the power coming from Errol Spence can somehow break through on Tszyu at some point in this fight. Never really did. This fight, I think, was, if you're going to lose, if it's going to be the last one, that's kind of how you want to do it mentally. I think of all the fighters, and I mean, I don't trust a one of them to stay retired when they tell me they're going to be retired. But if you press me right now today, will Errol Spence keep the gloves hung up? I'm tempted to say yes. I think because of the way he had to go out, the experience that he just had, intentional experience that he just had, might be enough to satisfy him to be like, I lived it one time right. A guy who drinks, a guy who does other things and is reckless, and like his mother said, doesn't take anything serious. You sometimes get to the end of the road and man, it's like, man, I never really appreciated it. I never really realized how rare a gift that I have. I never understood what these moments really meant and how they were fleeting. And when they're gone, they're gone. And so he took that extra lap. He took that one more fight. I don't think, not that he didn't want to win. Of course he did. But I think he took it not because he had to win, but because he had to be satisfied that he did it the right way one time, that he appreciated it the right way one time. And the proof to me in that is that this was an 11-round fight, not 12. Errol Spence retired after the 11th round. And a guy who really wants to win, a guy who's thinking maybe I got more for somebody else after this fight, maybe even knowing that you're behind on the cards, but, anything can happen, and not being hurt, not busted up, not cut, not crippled, goes out there and tries to really give it all in the last 3 minutes. I don't know. I didn't see the punch stats. I don't know if he threw more than 2-3 punches in the last round, if that. He was satisfied. He had done the thing. Errol Spence's career ended after that 11th round. And I wasn't at all surprised that he officially retired right there in the ring. And I do hope that that is the end. I hope, as much as I didn't want the end to be in Australia, I didn't want the end to be to Tim Tszyu. I wanted to see Errol Spence write one more chapter. I like how he did it. I think it satisfies those of us who want to see him go out well and appreciate for a minute what he was. And whether he's Hall of Fame or not, I guarantee you nobody's going to ask me, but they will ask you. And everything that you said is valid, but I might like to put this other bit, that intangible bit, in the mix when you decide.
Yeah, it's just not. And by the way, Mikey Garcia was on the pound-for-pound list and undefeated, undersized, but he was on the pound-for-pound list when Errol beat him all 12 rounds in Cowboy Stadium. So slight change there, amendment there. But not everybody has to go to the Hall of Fame. It's not this diss. The Hall of Very Good is a lot more celebrated in other sports. You know, there's a million great running backs and receivers. Chad Johnson's not in the Hall of Fame. Ocho Cinco, you know, multiple-time All-Star, memorable player. Anybody who watched him will remember him. Jamal Lewis as a running back in the NFL. Fred Taylor, who should be in the Hall of Fame, but still, like, there's in other sports, there's guys who made multiple All-Star games. They were stars. They were even great players for a time, but they don't necessarily all make the Hall of Fame. And Zab Judah, who I mentioned, and Adrian Broner and Marcos Maidana, Amir Khan, these are all really good for Ike Quarte. Like, there's a lot of guys who were Pro Bowlers who were really good, but being in the Hall of Very Good isn't a problem. And I'm just saying Spence is on the borderline of that. Is he really a guy who's in the Hall of Very Good, or is he truly a Hall of Famer? And I know everybody would like to bring up Arturo Gatti, and yeah, he was a better fighter than Arturo Gatti, but Gatti got in for being in great fights, not for being a great fighter. And he's one of the few fighters that fought in more than 3 Fight of the Years. I think the only other guys on that list are Ali and Robinson and maybe a few others, but that's a separate point. I just know that's the name that's always brought up as the low bar so that other guys should get in. And Vinny Paz eventually getting in, but he had to wait 20 or 30 years before he actually got in. And he's really a Hall of Very Good guy who just, after so many names eventually get scratched off the list. Some guys, they eventually just get in. And, you know, that might be guys like Spence and Judah and a few others I mentioned. But, yeah, on a separate note, look, I got to indulge for a minute. Please, if you don't believe me, check the comments of all the videos we've made on this fight, from the Emergency Live to the Emergency Podcast, as Raheem called it, the opening week podcast. Go check out the comments on the Porterweight podcast from earlier this week. Go look at the comments on the fight becoming official in May. And then before that, we did a video a month or two before May when it was actually signed. And just look at the vitriol I'm getting for mentioning all the things that came to fruition. So yes, because I was a bitch, I got bullied after 6 months of picking Tszyu and explaining exactly what was going to happen. I finally threw my hands up and went, fine. I don't want to take the risk of Spence pulling this off and his passionate, ardent fan base just not letting me breathe for the next month or the rest of the year. So I finally went, fine, I'm going to protect myself here. Spence by decision. And to be fair to Errol Spence, he looked good when he getting to Australia on the mitts with Ronnie Shields. He had good snap on his punches. He is the taller, longer fighter, so I'm thinking maybe the jab, which is the most important punch in the sport, is enough to dictate terms with Tim Tszyu, but he just didn't have any snap left on his shots to get to bother Tim Tszyu. And so the fight, Tszyu swung the momentum midway through and never looked back, and that's that. What I gotta talk about too is we talked about this pattern of PBC fighters. Well, you know what? Before we get to that, Terrence Crawford is ringside, right? And he's tweeting up.
Since we're taking a quick break, can I just comment on what you were feeling about your previous analysis?
Yes.
I mean, that was part of the reason I wanted that emergency pod, as I call it, was because the trepidation inside you. I needed you to work that through with the audience. And the real blessing is to get to watch in real time a guy who takes his analysis seriously, who looks at all the details, who is an encyclopedia of boxing knowledge, go through the gears. This was Sean's fight. And because we did so many pods in succession over the time from when the fight was announced to the morning of the fight, you got to watch through that thought process. And listen, he's not gonna, and I'm not saying that, oh, now because you had Tszyu picked for all this other time, you should get credit now after having changed your pick. But what I would tell people to do is when you finish trolling him and giving him the business for being wrong, go back and look at his thought process. You can learn a lot just about how to break down a fighter and how to assess a matchup from watching Sean go through the gears. And if you want to hold him accountable for his switching another pick at the end and being wrong, fair play, that's part of the game. But you would do yourself a disservice if you don't now, if you care enough to troll him and care enough to talk shit, go back and care enough to watch just how much he was right about, how he went through all of those pieces and brought them to you in analysis. And then you can see just how good an analyst he is. And that's why I don't often pick fights, because I don't care to be right. I care to tell you what I'm actually thinking. And I watch the fight, and I don't want to have to feel like Sean feels that I got to come to you people afterwards and be at your mercy. I don't care. I don't. And I often don't know. So I say that. And then I will watch the fight, having told you what I think about the narrative and the fighters, and be free from this anxiety. But you would be doing yourself a disservice if you don't go through the analysis of a guy who puts this much effort into it and learn what it is from all perspectives that he has pinpointed and earmarked throughout this process. That's what I enjoyed about our run up to this fight the most, that we let the audience travel with us through the gears.
Yeah, and it's Spence, once you become an actual star in boxing and you begin to flirt with celebrity, like, let's call it, the fan bases get very irrational and protective, and they crash you in the comments and everything. And I had PTSD from the Wilder fight. I was like, Wilder shot, I'll pick Chisora, but guess what? Chisora was just a shot, and Wilder winds up winning a really sloppy fight over Chisora. And Wilder, who I'd picked to lose by knockout to Zhang, they were nowhere to be found in those comments. But all of a sudden, the resurrection of the Deontay Wilder fan base, they just badger you. Yeah, you know, you were blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you know what? I don't even want to risk going through this again. I will just say Spence by decision, so that in the chance he pulls this off, I don't have to hear this shit. And yeah, I deserve some flack, because if Spence does win by decision, I go, hey, I still called it right. And I get people wanting to beat me up for the hedging and everything. Go ahead, but I got to keep it real with how I really feel about it in the aftermath. And so on to more things.
Well, you said Crawford was ringside.
Crawford was ringside, right? And there's this whole talk now about his wins over Spence and maybe Canelo. We'll see how Canelo looks. They're not aging well. Let me defend Crawford here. When they fought, and I know I acknowledged earlier Spence was on a decline in his performances, even going back to that fight, but Crawford would have always beaten Spence. And when he beat him when he was undefeated for the undisputed welterweight title. And at some point, the accomplishments of being undisputed at 140, 147, 168, being the only fighter to win titles from 138 to 168, 135 to 168, they speak for themselves. And there's only so much you can take away from when he beat the guy. I mean, it's fine to mention all that and be truthful in context, but at the end of the day, when he beat Spence, they were both undefeated, and it was for undisputed. So big credit to Terrence Crawford. Is it fair to point out the other context too? Yes, but what I find funny was Terrence, to me, seemed a little irritated that Spence performed badly. It's like, got me not looking good here. And he started tweeting up a storm during the fight, mentioning how bad his reflexes were. There was nothing on his shots. Body language was bad, etc., etc. All true things, by the way. He's 100% right in his assessment. But it was just kind of funny for a guy who was supposed to be there to support him. And sometimes supporting your friends is telling them the God-honest truth. But it did give a hint of he's irritated at some of the narratives that'll then be spun about it. And Terrence, to me, he still has that edge to him, man. And when you mentioned you think this will be enough for Spence to walk away, it has to be. He is donezo. This isn't like when Lennox walked away, or when Calzaghe walked away, or Andre walked away, or when Crawford's walking away. You're walking away on a win. You're walking away still the top dog. This has to be it for him. This is the end of the road, whether he would want it to be or not. And I respect the grit he always had a heart of a true champion. There's no quit in Errol Spence. He never even came close to quitting throughout his career. He is an absolute Texas dog, 100%. So, and he fought a very gritty performance in this fight. He was pretty much spent a little bit past the midway. He was spent a little bit past the midway point of the fight. And he just kept throwing and throwing and throwing, except for the 12th round, where it's like, it is what it is. This fight isn't going to change. Let's get on home safe here, right? And Tszyu, by the way, he's always a fighter that averages about 400 punches a round in the 12-round fight. So it looked like Spence was there for the taking, and he could have stepped it up and stopped him. But ultimately, Tszyu's always a guy who's going to throw right around 400 punches a round in a 12-round fight, and that's what he did last night. But for Crawford, it's like, maybe I contrasted with Floyd Mayweather. Floyd would have said, he's a hell of a fighter, had a hell of a career. I just want to wish him the best. And if you would have said, do you feel like this takes away from when you beat him? Absolutely not. When I fought Errol Spence, he was undefeated, he was undisputed, but I don't really want to get into that. Errol Spence, a hell of a fighter, hell of a career, and I tip my hat to him. He's a true champion. Crawford is like, man, he looks bad. He looks what I mean is he's still.
What would Errol Spence have said? Can you give me a little Errol Spence? What would Errol Spence have said, Sean?
He said, I can go home, get rest, things like that. Want to thank No Limit, and had a great career. Go home, get rest, be with my family, and things like that. And I want to thank Al Heyman, thank No Limit Boxing. Why'd you ask me to do this? I can't do it right now. But
I'm satisfied. Thank you for that.
So Crawford, he still has that edge, man. Like when Andre and Tim and Sean, when they went into the broadcast booth, they looked happy. Terrence, he's only had one broadcast with it, but he doesn't look like he loves it like that. I think Andre, he went right into the ESPN booth. Tim Bradley right into the ESPN booth, 100 miles an hour. Sean already had a podcast that you may have watched, people, that he already was building up before he retired in that last fight. Crawford, to me, still just seems like a guy with some edge to him. Like there's still some violence within him that maybe wants to get active. So how funny would it be if after all this, because we're thinking Floyd's going to come back to fight Pacquiao and everything, and it's actually Terrence who winds up coming back in a sanctioned fight before Floyd Mayweather does, like was originally intended earlier in the year with Pacquiao. And what if Terrence Crawford winds up losing his ode in a Jaron Ennis fight and not Floyd Mayweather? Like, what if Floyd's in the clear with the what seemed like financial troubles going on because the guy Jonah Reschnitz has gone to prison now, and Floyd, he's gonna get sued. He's gonna get sued for this Pacquiao fight not coming off. It's July, almost August. He still ain't getting sued, and there's no Pacquiao fight. But I'm just mentioning some irony, and then we do got to touch on the PBC thing, man. How they've been dropping like flies. Charlo hasn't fought in 3 years. The other Charlo can't make it to Australia because his visa. Stephen Fulton blows weight in back-to-back fights. Caleb Plant hasn't fought since last May. Spence is now retired. Keith Thurman is retired, whether he admits he's retired or not, after what happened with Fundora in March. It's not looking good.
It's the end of an era. It's the end of an era.
Yep.
This is partly why this fight felt so significant. And I believe Errol Spence, I'll say it again, really is the legacy bearer. He's the guy who was wearing the crest on his chest for PBC. He's that guy. He's always seemed to be that guy. Other guys have had their moments. Maybe Tank has outsold him. I don't know what you want to do with the statistics, but as far as just the brand of who would really represent what PBC was and what it meant in its foundational years, it's Errol Spence. And so to watch PBC come apart at the seams and what might soon be kind of drift off into irrelevance, at the moment that we see Errol Spence retired in the way that he has retired himself. And I don't think boxing retired him. I think he went back on his own terms and he went out on his own terms. He didn't go out on his back. He didn't get beat down and stomped out. Again, I believe every second of that fight, even at the very end when he was clearly not even fighting anymore in the 12th and knew the decision was going to go the other way, he was soaking it all up and living it and appreciating it, and he'll remember all of those moments fondly, even though, of course, he would have preferred to win. That moment at a cross axis with what might be the end of the PBC era, maybe forever, but who knows? We've seen these promotions come back. I'm not at all saying that somehow they can't pull a rabbit out of the hat, because the PBC obituary has been written a few times before, mind you. So we can't say it's done. And if Al decides that this is what he's focused on again and this is his number one priority, I do not put it past him to bring PBC back. But at the moment, how it feels is that something that we all live through, something that's a major part of all of our careers who do this and in the ring, is coming to a close. And it feels like, part of something in our lives is like, oh, this is about to be history.
Yeah, and another name I left out was Gervonta, who hasn't fought in a year and a half, isn't going to fight the rest of this year, and we'll see. Hold on. Are you still there, Raheem?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You froze for a minute. My bad. But is Gervonta, and that's supposed to be the franchise player, and he's MIA and got his legal problems. So really the franchise player is David Benavidez, and we talked about this morning. It's like, what purpose does Benavidez have to re-sign beyond just loyalty, And honestly, at some point, how is that loyalty? If they've made good on their investment, he's went on, he's become a star, they've promoted some fights. Outside of just, splitting some bread with them because they're loyal, what do they have to offer going forward for a guy like Benavidez? If he wants to fight Bivol or Beterbiev on DAZN, he doesn't need Al Heyman and PBC to do that anymore. Tom Brown or Samson Lukowicz, he could just sign an exclusive deal with DAZN like Devin apparently has and Teofimo has. And if he wants to fight Opataya, then he's got to go to Zuffa. So they're really just down. I mean, and the longer Tank stays out of the ring, the more dangerous and dicey his fights get of him actually winning them. Like you saw with Errol Spence not fighting in 3 years. Keith Thurman not fighting just fighting once in 3 or 4 years. So it's something to keep looking at as we go on, but it's not looking good. There's no cupboards filled with young talent. They don't have any prospects. The remaining guys they got is Gervonta Davis, who will wind up not fighting for 2 years whenever he gets back in the ring, is into his 30s now. Sebastian Fundora, who is an excellent fighter who's gotten better, but is an underdog to someone like Jaron Ennis, and he's fighting on a network in DAZN that's going to want Ennis to win. That's who their wagon is hitched to now on DAZN. And you got Benavidez, but what do you have to offer Benavidez, who's the most important fighter now in your stable? You don't have any other guy, anybody you had in your stable, Andrade, Caleb Plant, David Morrell, he already beat them all, and that's why he had to fight Anthony Yard and Gilberto Ramirez in his last 2 fights, 2 fighters out of your stable. So if he wants to fight, again, the names Bivol, Beterbiev, and Opataya, inking an extension with PBC when he's only got 1 fight left on his deal with his current promotional setup, they don't bring anything to the table in helping him make those fights happen. He doesn't act. They're an unnecessary party to making those fights happen now. So, and then Gary Antoine fights once a year like his brother used to, and he's a very good fighter, but he's not a big draw either. And yeah, he only fights once a year. So I'm not sure where they're headed. I wouldn't underestimate Al Heyman. I got love for people in their company 100%. I've enjoyed a lot of nights in my career covering their fights, seen some great fights under their banner, but I don't know if the future is looking too good, man. And a lot of people have been saying that now for a while. Like you said, their obituary's been written a few times prematurely, but we'll see what happens.
That's a 3-legged stool. That's enough to keep you going. Tank Davis, Benavidez, Fundora, that can keep you afloat for sure. And as I said to you privately before the show, there's something in the relationship. Can you mute yours? There's something in the relationship between Al Haymon and his fighters that is special, that is out of the earshot and eye view of all of us, and only they know what it is, so we can only speculate. However, at many crucial points throughout his relationship with all these fighters and the growing of PBC to its pinnacle and to this moment, he's been able to retain guys who on the surface appear to have much better options. He's been able to convince guys to not do fights that are clearly in their best interest to keep whatever Al Haymon's agenda is intact. And with these three fighters, if he's able to keep them in the stable, he's definitely able to grow that stable. I mean, this is still a brand, I believe, in America that carries weight. I think a lot of young fighters will look at the past PBC fighters and see them as guys they would like to be in league with. If Al is still invested and still engaging in this process with the energy and enthusiasm that he once did, I certainly don't put past Al Haymon the ability to keep PBC in the game and make the necessary deals that he needs to make in the moment to stay on DAZN, to stay on other platforms, keep his fights maybe sporadically, few and far between, but keep big fights coming every now and then, get Gervonta Davis back in. 30's not that old, and if he's maybe even doing fights that we'll still criticize, Gervonta's one of those guys who really people will show up to watch fight just about anybody. He has that magic that he can fill arenas, can fill a stadium probably if it's a real opponent, with people that you don't really need to see him fight, but there's so many people out there who need to see Gervonta fight that he can carry that water. This right now, I believe, is one of those moments where we'll find out if Al is still really at PBC the way he once was. If he is still invested and engaged and thoroughly about this action like he once was. Because the other thing he could be doing is just divesting personally. Al is a mastermind at not spending his own money, not leveraging or risking his own empire and building it off of other people's investments and platforms and backs. And this association with DAZN is maybe evidence of that. So if Al's taking his attention elsewhere and pulling back, well, then I don't know that PBC can make a resurgence without him. And if that's the case, then yes, all three of these fighters eventually are going to have to go their own way and do their own thing. But keeping Gervonta Davis out of that DAZN deal lets me know they're not quite ready to give up the whole ship just yet. You know, and so that's the marker to watch. That's the linchpin. And because he doesn't do interviews and doesn't make public appearances, and we never really know what the hell is going on with Al Haymon, we'll only know when it is evident based on the business that PBC does. But the other thing is that we can't forget is you could leave PBC, being Benavidez, and still be advised by Al Haymon personally.
Yes.
He can still do, there's a side option there. Like Al Haymon is a business genius, man, and really has the kind of influence over fighters that you might only be analogous to like mob ties. And I'm not suggesting he's a criminal. I'm just saying there's a deeper bond there that the outsiders don't understand. And if you leave PBC and maybe he lets PBC go in a way and gets his money out and takes his last few checks out of that and goes back to just being an advisor of particular fighters, and he's involved in these business deals and involved in these careers, and that's how Al plays it again. That's a full-blown option, and I could see Benavidez taking a road like that.
Yeah, so could I, but they're all, in the same boat right now. Top rank, Bob Arum, in his twilight. Their roster is, I think the quantity of fighters they have is the lowest it's been in a long time. And everybody's losing talent a little bit. Oscar, Ryan always seems like he wants to get out at the first exit he can, but he still got him for the foreseeable future. Virgil, he just had a lawsuit with. I like Caden Griffin and some of the other young fighters he has, but, you know, Top Rank, PBC, and Golden Boy all being on DAZN. They're still here, and there's still big fights revolving around them, but they have all receded in power and in influence and are all kind of stranded on DAZN, more so than willing participants who this was their final plan to get there. And
you were about to say stranded on death row.
Death row. Stranded on death row. We'll see, but yeah, we'll see what happens. They are, you know, I don't underestimate those three companies, but they're up against it. There's a monster called TKO up against them now. Eddie Hearn is the golden child of DAZN. He was their day one, their bottom one, and we'll see what happens, you know. We'll see what happens. But
in the way that boxing is the microcosm of the world, there's a new world order afoot, and we're gonna see who tops the pyramid, who tops the totem pole, and who bottoms out but is still in the game. That's what the next chapter of boxing is. That's what the next chapter of the world is. So it's going to be interesting to watch and be able to analyze it from this perspective.
And hats off again to Errol "The Truth" Spence. Excellent career, and a guy who seems like he's made a lot of money and is taking care of it. Great family man, a warrior who showed his warrior heart in every fight he fought in. And the best thing I could say about Errol Spence's skill set in his prime, he's a fighter I would have someone like my son study, because not everybody has the athletic gifts to study and implement a Floyd Mayweather, a Roy Jones style, but any young fighter at any talent level could learn from Errol Spence. Keep those hands up, use that jab a lot, work the body, step around. He made a lot of the fundamentals. He executed a lot of the fundamentals of the sport at some of the highest levels in his prime, and any young fighter of any talent level could learn from that. So hats off to Errol "The Truth" Spence on an excellent career. Job well done.
I echo that, and it should be mentioned, shout out to Australia. Shout out to the promotion. Shout out to the Tszyu family. Shout out to how well they respected Errol. They put this fight on when fighters were dropping out and it was getting shaky right there in the 11th hour. If you didn't watch the post-fight press conference, go to the very end and hear them thank Errol Spence and applaud him vigorously and cheer him on the way out of that building. It was heartwarming. I'm proud of Australia. You know, a lot of people say a lot of things about how people of color are treated there. I've never been there. I'm sure those things have their truth. But the truth this week was respected, and I am proud of those people, and I was heartwarmed by the way they treated Errol Spence and the business of boxing. So farewell for now, Errol. I hope to see you down the road in whatever way this life decides to bring you joy. And thank you for an incredible number of great nights and years I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Big fish.
Lots
Man
of class.
down.
But now
Straps.
the man down strap sees a bit. And now the big fish in the small pond, once and for all in Australia, is Tim Tszyu, who is now going to be able to, who has climbed out of his dad's shadow a bit by beating a fighter of Spence's decorated resume. And he scores one of the biggest wins in Australian boxing history, especially on Australian soil. So he's going to continue to be a major attraction in Australia. He's in the right kind of division to try to get his hands on a world title again. And Tim Tszyu was being underrated in this fight. He was being slept on stateside here in the United States and was even an underdog in his own backyard, and he got the job done. So shout out, big salute to Tim Tszyu now, who's in position now to make a run at a title at 160. So thanks, everyone.
What's his motherfucking name?
What's Tim Tszyu?